She walked into school expecting another day of cruelty, but when the bullies slapped her in front of 200 students, she didn't cry, she smiled. What she did next shook the entire school, dismantled the bullies' power, and turned her into a legend they would never forget. If you love powerful revenge, shocking twists, emotional justice, and an ending that hits harder than the slap, then hit subscribe and get ready, because this story will stay with you forever. In a prestigious school where reputation mattered more than kindness and where popularity was treated like currency, 17-year-old Alina had learned early that silence was the only protection she could afford, yet even silence wasn't enough to shield her from the cruelty of the three girls who ruled the school like a throne. Zara, Misha, and Ariba, known as the Diamond Trio, feared by many and adored by those who believed power excused cruelty, but Alina never worshipped them, which ironically made her their favorite target, and on that unforgettable morning, everything changed, beginning when Alina walked into the auditorium for the assembly, unaware that the trio had planned the biggest humiliation of her life, one they believed would break her completely, because bullies always think victims are weak, but they never consider what happens when a quiet girl has finally had enough, and as the students gathered, whispering and pointing, Alina tried to ignore the looks, adjusting her backpack strap nervously, her heart pounding as she moved toward an empty seat, but before she could sit, Zara stepped in front of her, blocking her path, smirking with the sort of confidence only someone intoxicated by power possesses, and in a voice dripping with mock sweetness, she said, "Look who showed up, our favorite charity case," causing the crowd to snicker as Alina remained silent, swallowing the ache in her chest, but Misha moved behind her, intentionally bumping her hard enough to force her forward, and the papers she carried scattered across the floor, triggering laughter that echoed through the auditorium like a cruel chorus, yet Alina stooped to pick them up quietly, refusing to give them the satisfaction of seeing her cry. But when she reached for the last sheet, Ariba stomped her foot on it, preventing her from lifting it, whispering, "Pick it up now, if you dare," and when Alina met her eyes, something inside her cracked, not in a way that broke her, but in a way that lit a fire, though the trio didn't notice, too consumed by their performance, and as Alina stood slowly, her papers still under their feet, Zara performed the act she had rehearsed, raising her hand dramatically and slapping Alina across the face with full force, the crack of the impact reverberating through the silence and the entire room gasping as the force of the slap sent Alina stumbling sideways, her cheek blazing with pain, her ears ringing, but the worst part wasn't the pain, it was the laughter, the hundreds of eyes witnessing her humiliation, and the trio grinning triumphantly, thinking they had finally broken her, but Alina didn't cry, didn't run, she lifted her chin slowly, shocking everyone as she straightened her back calmly, her eyes cold and burning with a strength no one had ever seen before, and in that moment, something shifted in the crowd as they saw the transformation that even Alina didn't fully understand, a strength she'd buried for too long rising like a storm, and with a steady voice, she said loudly, "Are you done?" Making Zara's smirk falter, because victims aren't supposed to speak, especially not like that, but Alina continued, "If humiliation is the only language you know, then let me teach you something new," and gasps rippled through the students as teachers rushed toward the stage, but Alina wasn't finished, stepping forward until she was toe-to-toe with Zara, her voice cold and steady as she said, "You slapped me in front of everyone. Now watch how fast your empire collapses," and then she walked away, picking up her things without rushing, leaving a stunned auditorium behind her, and by lunchtime the entire school buzzed with whispers, because no one had ever spoken to the Diamond Trio like that, but while everyone thought she'd either complain or crumble, Alina was doing something else entirely, something brilliant, something none of them expected, starting with walking into the principal's office holding a small flash drive, her cheeks still red but her voice unwavering as she asked to speak privately, requesting only one teacher to stay as witness, and when both adults sat down, she plugged the drive into the computer and played a video clip that made the principal's jaw drop. A full recording, not just of the slap, but months of harassment caught on the school's own cameras, footage she had collected quietly because she knew confronting the trio directly would only be dismissed without proof. And when she showed the principal the time-stamped evidence, including audio clips, verbal threats, vandalism of her belongings, and physical harassment, the principal's face went pale, because the school's reputation was at stake, and ignoring it was impossible, especially since the school board had recently implemented strict anti-bullying policies under government pressure, meaning consequences were mandatory and immediate. But Alina wasn't done. She also showed evidence that Zara's father, a school donor, had pressured teachers into inflating Zara's grades, and when the principal realized the legal trouble this could bring, he acted faster than Alina expected, calling an emergency disciplinary meeting with the school board, administrators, and the families involved, and in that meeting, the trio's parents tried everything: denial, bribery, intimidation, but the evidence was too overwhelming, and for the first time in their lives, the trio faced consequences: suspension effective immediately, academic investigation, loss of privileges, and their once untouchable reputation shattered publicly. But the real shock came when the school board announced that during their suspension, the trio would be removed from all school positions, clubs, and influence platforms, essentially dethroning them, and the news spread across the school like wildfire, turning the trio into the biggest scandal the school had ever seen. But while everyone talked about them, they also talked about Alina, the quiet girl who stood up, the girl no one noticed until she refused to be ignored, and by the next morning, instead of whispers, the hallways filled with looks of awe and newfound respect as students stepped aside to make room for her, some even apologizing for not stepping in earlier. But Alina didn't crave sympathy, she wanted justice, and she already had it, though she didn't expect what came next, because when the trio returned after their suspension, they were different, no longer entitled, no longer confident. They walked with their heads down, avoiding eye contact, but they were also threatened by something new: the fear of losing the little reputation they still had. And on their first day back, Zara approached Alina quietly, her voice trembling as she said, "Can we talk?" But Alina shook her head calmly, saying, "I don't owe you anything," and walked away, leaving Zara speechless. And students watched, realizing the power dynamic had flipped completely, turning Alina into a symbol of strength. But despite everything, Alina didn't become a bully herself. She stayed focused on her goals, joining the debate club, excelling in academics, and eventually discovering a talent for public speaking, which led her to win the regional competition, gaining recognition from universities and even appearing in a local newspaper. And years later, when she stood on stage as the youngest motivational speaker invited to address a global youth summit, she began her speech with the words, "The day they slapped me in front of 200 students was the day I learned what real strength looks like, not in my silence, but in my voice." And the audience erupted with applause. But the story didn't end there, because destiny has a way of tying loose ends in unexpected ways. And years after graduation, Alina ran into Zara again, not in a school hallway, but in a corporate lobby, where Zara, now humbled and working as a junior assistant, looked at Alina with a mixture of shock and respect as she realized Alina was the new keynote speaker for the event her company was hosting. And when they met, Zara approached her nervously, saying, "I'm sorry for everything," and this time, Alina smiled, not with bitterness, but with peace, replying, "You don't owe me anything anymore. Life taught us both what we needed to learn." And Zara nodded with tears in her eyes, grateful for forgiveness she never deserved, while Alina walked onto the stage to deliver another speech that moved thousands, becoming a global advocate for anti-bullying campaigns, mental health awareness, and student rights. And though she never sought fame, her courage turned her into an icon of empowerment, proving that sometimes the loudest transformation begins with a single moment of cruelty, and sometimes the most powerful response is not revenge, but rising so high that the people who once hurt you can only look up in awe. Because the girl who was slapped in front of 200 students did not break, she rose, she fought, she conquered, and she changed everything.